Hola. That just came to me.
Hi, this is Jen Grant, and you're
Hi,
listening.
this is Graham Kay.
Hi.
And you were listening
This is Adam Fox, and you're listening
This
to
is
the...
Dylan Mandelson, and you're listening to the...
This is Brian Hatt, and you are listening to the Julian.
Hi, this is the word man of Alcatraz.
Señores, signori.
Hey, everybody, this is Little Darren Frost.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Mi nombre es Fabio Mantoan y están escuchando a Julián Dion.
This is Dave Sidhu, and you're listening to the Julian Dion Comedy Podcast.
Podcast hour. Showcase.
You are listening to the Julian Dion Comedy Hour Podcast.
Hola.
This episode of the Julian Dion Comedy Hour, episode 19. Oh, legal age. Drinking can't... Legal... Episode 19 with Dean Young is brought to you once again by Echo One Photography. Toronto listeners, this is for you. This one right here. If you're a business person, musician, actor, comedian, whoever, and you need to get some headshots done, go to Echo One Photography. They do a really good job. Yeah. Also, if you own a business in the GTA and looking to get some product photography done for advertising or e-commerce purposes, go to Echo One Photography. Email Eugene, that's EUGENE at echo1photography.com, and enter JDCH in the subject box for special offers and discounts. Do it today.
A beautiful waste of time. A waste of time. A beautiful waste of time.
Oh shit.
A waste of time.
What a beautiful waste of time. Welcome to the Julian Dion Comedy Hour Podcast, episode 19. As the poorly read ad suggested off the top, 19. Finally, legal drinking age in Canada. The podcast is growing up before our very eyes. Welcome, everybody. Thanks to listening. Thanks for listening. Great episode today. My guest, Dean Young, founder of Talkhole, Canada's only podcast network. That's right. Just launched about a month ago. And we talk about that. He's also a comedian with a background in radio, so we sort of dissect his trajectory in the business and all that jazz. Dean Young will be up in a bit. But before, how you doing? Oh, I should say, coming at you, of course, from Lemon Press Studios, downtown Toronto. Hi. Hi. Are you good? I'm glad you're good. Or, oh shit, you're not good. I'm so sorry. I wish you were better. So whichever of these two responses better suits you, please use it. Use it. Take it and run with it. Oh, it's a good day. It's just overall. Thanks to everyone who came out to Say What this past Wednesday, November 19th. It was a great, fun show. It was one of the good ones. One for the books. Waste of time. Garage Baby was there, killing it. As always, I felt like I had something to mention off the top, and I can't. Anyway, it's gone. If it comes back to me, I'll just spit it out. Coronation Street is so good these days. Oh man, it's heated. Any Corey fans up there? Anybody under the age of 69, 68, 70 that watches the show? It's so good. It's just such an average like the people on it are just so average. Like I get really defensive when people call Coronation Street a soap opera, because I guess technically it is, but it isn't at the same time. Because when I think soap opera, I think of, over dramatic, crazy, unrealistic sort of living life, mixed, not mixed, inbreeding, sort of. Everyone fucking everyone. There's a little bit of that goes on Coronation Street, but it's such a vanilla, like, mild version of that. It's just, again, the people aren't very attractive. It's bad lighting. It's one of the only shows on TV that you'll see, like, old people fully making out, like, passionate love scenes. It's great. I love it. This is how average the show. Just to give you an example, this is how like quote average. I'm trying to think of another word on the fly. Okay, for lack of a better word, vanilla. Kind of. It's a show that breaks the rules. I'll give you an example. They eat on camera. They eat full scenes where they're eating, and I don't mean like at the end of a scene, like you're leaving a scene like, see you later. Bite an apple, leave. I mean, like, they'll start a scene eating. And usually it's the people with the lines that are eating too. Usually you'll have some extras that are in the background eating to depict sort of a dinner scenario, a scene. And then the people with the lines just sort of mimic eating or don't even touch the food, really. But Coronation Street, no, fuck that. They break the rules. Average. Bringing you real life. It's reality TV, scripted reality TV. Because it's the people with the dialogue that eat the most, in fact, in the scenes. They'll start a scene, they'll actually it's like a challenge. They'll shovel just their mouths full of food and then start saying their lines. Open mouth, chewing, talking. It's great. It's revolting. It's beautiful. I'll give you another example of how kind of like vanilla it is. Like it's a mild, I wish I could think of the word. Email me, pod@jdcomedyhour.com if you can come up with the word I'm trying to describe. I think kind of vanilla or like safe, I guess. Here's an example of a storyline. And they stretch storylines over a few episodes. There was the bistro owner. Someone came to slight him by unplugging his fridge, and he lost all of his meat. Do you know what I mean? Kind of vanilla. Like, it's not a murder, even though there are some murders that happen. But okay, here's a perfect example of what I'm trying to say. Okay, here's a storyline. Okay, this is how light or vanilla it is. Fuck, I wish I could think. That doesn't feel right, the word. Here's what I'm trying to talk about. I'm trying to say. Okay, storyline. There's Fizz and Chesney, brother or sister, both redhead. That's not important. I don't know why I said that. And they have a mother, but they're estranged. Their mother is estranged. They haven't seen her in years, and they couldn't be happier about that. They're fine with it. She's selfish. She only thinks of herself, and they want nothing to do with their mother. They're, in fact, raising their own families on their own. There's some kids in the picture. There's some, I don't know if they're married. They're like in long-term relationships. They're getting along just great without their mother, and they couldn't be happier about the fact that she's not in their lives, and they're not in hers. But all of a sudden, knock at the door. Who is it? It's Fizz and Chesney's mother back in the picture. Oh my God, what does she want? She wants something. She always wants something. She hasn't been around in years. She's never met her grandkids. All of a sudden, she shows up at the door like everything. She wants to pick up where we left off. Fuck that. So they reject her. They turn on her. She's no more than an acquaintance to them. Certainly not a mother. So they're kind of polite, but they reject her. They're weary. What does she want? She wants something. Ooh, I just know it. I know it. She's selfish. She's going to be around for about a week and a half. Her visit lasts the whole week, the whole time. They're wondering, what does she want? There's something different about her, but what does she want, though? I don't know. There's something off, but she wants something. She's selfish. Her trip comes to an end. She's leaving. She's on her way to the bus stop. On the way to the bus stop, she confesses to Chesney's girlfriend, her potential future daughter-in-law, that you know what? You know the real reason she's here? She's actually ill. She's not doing too well. Her days are numbered. That's why she's here. She didn't want anything from her family other than their love and appreciation and acceptance. She just wants her children back, her grandchildren back. She wants her family. Because turns out she might not have that long. She's not well. So Chesney's girlfriend rushes off after she hears this confession. Oh my God, can't believe we were so rude to her. She runs back, tells Fizz and Chesney, you guys, your mom actually doesn't want anything. She's ill. She's not well. That's why she showed up out of the blue. She's trying to burn this bridge. The bridge had been burnt for so long. There wasn't even a bridge anymore. There was no roads leading up to the bridge. It was just like two pegs on the side of a cliff. It's like, oh yeah, that bridge was. They're like, oh my God, she's ill. What? Yes. She's sick. You guys? This is why she's back. Oh my God, what have we done? So they feel horrible. Here we are, our mother's trying to make amends. Our mother. Here we think she's selfish. We find out she's sick. Oh, so they run to the bus stop. They catch her in time. Luckily, she's still there. She's still there. Hasn't caught the next bus out of town yet. They bring her home. Mom, oh my God, we're so sorry. We had no idea. How could you hide this from us? You should have just come right out and said it, that we didn't know that you're ill. And she admits, yeah, I know I should have said something, but you know what? I'm not well. I'm very ill. Turns out her diagnosis, osteoporosis. Early onset osteoporosis. You know what I mean? They couldn't even make her terminally ill. She could, this is what I mean by like vanilla. Or the word I'm looking for. Email me the word pod, P-O-D, at jdcomedyhour.com. Early onset osteoporosis, no less. All right. I'm going to get to my guest right away because we had a nice long chat, and I think you'll like it. I think you'll enjoy it quite a bit. Like I said, we talk comedy, we talk radio, we talk podcasting. We touch a little bit on everything. We talk about owning a home in Toronto. That's right. And he's a good guy. You're going to enjoy him. Hey, you're going to enjoy him. Take your time. Breathe. You're going to enjoy him a lot. Enjoy my chat now with Mr. Dean Young.
You and me belong, just like the flowers, laughing all day long. People, I need you loose. Sing a little song, then take a shower. Julian Dion, Comedy Hour.
You guys remember Degrassi High, the original? Yeah. That was a dark show, right? Can you guys agree with me on that? Like, that was a pretty serious show. Like, I remember being a kid, and I'd be watching, like, let's say Saved by the Bell, right? Saved by the Bell was always, like, a nice, innocent time, and every episode was pretty much the same. It was always, like, they're hanging out in the Max there in the diner, you know, drinking some root beer floats, figuring out how to pull another fast one over an old Principal Belding. Nice, innocent time. And then you'd flip channels over to Degrassi. Shit got real instantly, every single time, right away. It'd be like, oh, I'm pregnant. Well, I'm going to the bathroom and I'm shooting myself in the head during 5th period math. What the hell is going on? It was true, but the reason why, you guys, look, okay, I don't want to, like, start dropping conspiracy theories on you guys here. But the reason why is because Degrassi High was created by the Canadian government to keep kids in line through fear. It was, right? And it worked. It worked, too. Because, like, I remember watching Degrassi when I was a kid, and I would always think, like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it now. Like, the older I get when I'm a teenager, if I act like an asshole, bad things are going to happen to me, right? Like, I could get into a drunk driving accident, or I could take some bad acid, or I could get AIDS. I know that's a room killer, you guys, but it happened on Degrassi. You could Wikipedia that if you don't believe me. Or I could go on a cross-country road trip to find my biological parents and get picked up by an old dude in a wood-paneled station wagon who rubs your inner thigh just a little bit. Happen to wheels, you guys.
Okay, everybody, that is my guest that you just heard there. He's a fantastic gentleman. He's a comedian. He's a radio guy. He's a writer, producer, podcaster. He does it all. He's a man of many hats, comedy-wise, stand-up-wise. You can see him perform all over the city. He's got a few shows under his belt. He's got a special, No Kidding special on iChannel that aired last year at one point. Last year. Yeah. He's got a weekly show, Kitsch Comedy, at Kitsch Eats and Beats in Bloordale Hill in Toronto. He also hosts The Night is Young with Dean Young, which is a monthly, it's on hiatus now, which is sort of like a late night talk show format at Comedy Bar. And like I said, he's a contributing writer for The Scene magazine and Toronto is Awesome. He's got 10 years, a decade worth of radio experience, both on air and as a writer. He's a podcasting superstar. You can find his podcast, what is it? The Forever Young with Dean Young and Friends, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Too many
that's
Youngs and Deans.
I know, they all have my name in them.
And now his latest venture, which we'll get into a little bit, is he's at the helm of a Canada's only podcast network.
Yeah,
I believe, right? It's the only one. There was one, Pod Almighty, which he sort of took over and then sort of rebranded it under this. As I've said his name already a million times, Dean Young is my guest. He's here in Lemon Press Studios. Welcome, gentle sir. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. I love being called gentle sir. I never get that in intros.
In Lemon Press Studios, you do.
In Lemon Press Studios. It's nice and cozy here. I love it.
It's cozy. It's really fucking clammy today.
It's warm.
Sorry for butchering your intro a little bit. I was kind of all over the map.
No, that was pretty smooth because you actually listed many things. It was nice.
Well, you do many things. You're a man of many things.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's get a little background on Dean Young. Let's find out who is.
Oh boy.
31 years of age.
Yeah, coming up.
When did you turn 31?
Well, by the time this airs, I'll be 31. But as of time of recording, I am 3 days away from 31. 3 days shy.
Shit.
Yeah. But it's not like last year. It's not like when I was in my my last few days of my 20s.
Yeah.
Where I was like, man, I gotta go for broke.
Yeah.
This is it. Now it's just like, no, now I'm just deeper into my 30s.
You're just deep.
So now
deep
I don't.
in.
Yeah.
How do you feel about being in your 30s?
I settled into it nicely. It's weird. In the last year, because you and I both turned 31 within like the same span.
Yeah,
of
I'm
like
October.
A month and
You're
a half, and,
November.
And it's funny. I really settled into it because when I turned 30, obviously that's a bit of a milestone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of my cousins saying, "You're going to get depressed for no reason." And I was like, well, that's bullshit. That's not. He was like, no. And he told me this story about how he was like out in his garage because, where we come from, that's what we call it. We don't have a garage.
Garage.
We have a garage
I'm the same,
on the Minnesota border, right? And he said, I was out in my garage one day working on a car. And I cracked a beer and then I just started crying for no reason. And I had no idea why. And I was like, well, nothing like that's going to happen. But it was true. I just got depressed for no reason.
Did you?
For like 2 days.
Yeah.
And I was just in a weird mood and just depressed. But now this year, turning 31, I'm just like, it's just more of the same. But it's been a very adult year. Like I had a nephew.
There you go.
Bought a house. I got engaged.
Yeah, we'll get into all of that.
Oh my God.
I want to hear
now
about
I'm an
the house.
adult. And I love it. I love it, man. Like this birthday, like last year was a big party and I did like a roast that we recorded and all this stuff. But this year I'm like,
I'm hanging out in your new garage.
Yeah, I'm going to a spa for Christ's sake. That's my whole. Yeah, maybe drink some VQA wine. Listen to Paul Simon.
Spa is a good way to spend an afternoon. But it's funny you say that you're depressed. I mean, so many listeners that are over the age of 32 will be like, fuck, depressed. Fuck that guy.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
because it's so young. I mean, I didn't get
It
depressed
is.
at all. I was like, all right, here we go. I'm a grown ass man now. It
Yeah.
seems so official. Like you're like, let's do this. Let's.
You have that certain wisdom to you, though. I feel like you have a certain maturity that I don't possess. I'm sort of like the quintessential man child, I think.
Really?
Oh yeah.
You don't seem that way.
I have. I'm responsible responsible is a loose, fast and loose word to describe a comedy career with.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say I'm responsible with like, being organized and keeping all my projects in check. And
Yeah, you
stuff
have a
like
vision.
that.
You know where you're.
Yeah, but as far as like personality wise, I don't feel like I'm that much different from what I was when I was a teenager. Really.
I don't feel any different.
You know?
I feel like emotionally and mentally I'm probably 17.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because a friend of mine told me like once, it was actually Natasha Henderson who originally produced Kitsch that you mentioned. She told me, you're gonna love it when you're in your 30s because it's still a young decade. It's still, you're having fun and you're youthful enough and all that, but you're also sure of yourself. When you're in your 20s, you're kind of like, sometimes you're going to fuck up and sometimes weird things are going to happen. And sometimes it's still awkward because that's sort of the decade where you become an adult. But she said, when you're in your 30s, you're just so much more sure of who you are and who you want to be and who you want around you and what you want to accomplish. And it is true, I have to say.
Yeah.
I guess most cliches are that because they're true, but I do find I'm just comfortable,
There you go. Any listeners in your 20s, you're hearing it first
Right?
from two old hams.
And any listeners older than us are just like, whatever.
Yeah, fuck those guys.
Yeah. You still have an ass.
They know nothing. Yeah. So your background is predominantly radio, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
started 10 years ago,
Yeah.
the ripe old age of 20,
That's true, yeah.
in Thunder Bay?
Yep.
Hometown. Thunder Bay boy. How did you get into radio?
Just sort of fell backwards into it. I started off in film and television. So I went to film school, and then I was screenwriting from there, and I sort of moved around a lot. I was, freelance writer, and I lived in Ottawa for a few years. I mean, anybody, certainly your Canadian listeners will know that's not, unless you want to do like government stuff and like PSAs and industrials, there's not a ton of work there for freelance screenwriting, let alone comedy writing, And then on top of that, if you don't speak French,
Right.
which I fall into the category of, there's not a lot of that. And I started doing radio. I started writing stuff for radio, and I don't know. I loved the sort of mythology of it. I liked old school radio, I liked the idea of these people being in a studio and just like everything was all about the voice and the writing on the page, and that was it. You sort of create this whole world where it's not dependent on a budget. You're not having to scrap all this stuff after investing time and money in it. It's just sort of in the moment.
Theater of the mind.
Theater of the mind.
Todd Glass talks about it. Like,
Yeah.
he's like, his analogy was like, if you're filming a movie and you want a helicopter, that's going to cost you like hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you're in radio and you need a helicopter, drop in a soundbite.
Exactly.
And that's it.
And that's the fun of it. And so I sort of, I thought, okay, well, I want to get into this medium and like get into the old school origins of it, like get back to sort of the roots of it. And that's sort of how I cut my comedy teeth. Was I was working for all these rock stations and writing comedy bits and on-air sketches and stuff for morning show hosts and afternoon drive hosts and just like rock jocks, the like heroes of whatever towns I was working in. And that was sort of how I cut my comedy teeth. Just if it passed their laugh test, it got on the air.
How do you, is there a formula to writing sketch for morning radio? Like, how does that work?
Again, it's the whole, it's definitely the whole theater of the mind thing. So you're setting up a situation or setting up a premise without having to narrate it for the audience. You know, like I actually remember it being a very tricky thing to get into. Coming out of film and television, like everything I would write was very visual, and I really had to sort of slap myself on the wrist over and over again and sort of train myself to just write for the ear, as kooky as that sounds, but it's true. And it's sort of a different, almost more pure form of comedy where it's just all in the moment and it's live and there's no room to set anything up. You just have to completely take people with you right there in the moment. And that's sort of how I started doing it.
And you don't get reaction from audience or anything like that, obviously. So is the test just the hosts? They go through it. They think it's going to land.
Pretty much. Like, I mean, and I saw things change in, the era of like social media and Twitter and stuff like that. But even when I was first starting in radio, writing comedy stuff, there really was no feedback unless a listener would call in and tell them about something we just aired. But until then, it was really just the hosts.
Right.
It was kind of like they'd go with their gut. If they thought what I wrote was funny, they would do it on the air, and that was it. And they're also protective of their personality,
right?
Their on-air brand, because they're these, especially in smaller cities and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
they're the local morning show host that's on all the billboards and that's live at the Mazda dealership on Saturday afternoon.
In small towns, like celebrity radio personalities are like celebrities.
Oh, they totally are.
It's crazy.
It's so weird. It was like there was this one. You ever see that Bruce Willis movie, Breakfast of Champions? It was a Kurt Vonnegut book, actually. But he's like this small town. He was like a small town car dealer. But it's you're totally a celebrity in these towns when you're a radio guy and you're out, at car dealerships hosting a live event and stuff like that, or at sports games. You're a rock star.
Yeah,
it's so funny. So they were, when I first started out, it's just like, we might let this kid write something for us. And I really had to, prove myself to them. And then eventually they would let me be on the air with them and do bits on the air with them and come on in character and do different stuff. And
because your writing is pretty good. I mean, I've read, the articles you've written in like Scene Mag, really well, excuse me, written. When you say you were drawn to like the old school radio aspects of radio, what do you mean by that? Like, just more of the talk, the personality-based radio kind of thing, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Where I think I first got into it really was Orson Welles, because it's the biggest cliche in the world for a film student to be like, Citizen Kane is the be-all, end-all, but it of course was for you when you're, 18, 19-year-old film student. So from Citizen Kane, I was like, all right, let's look more into this Orson Welles guy. And then I found out about all this crazy radio stuff that he did, like he did this live War of the Worlds broadcast where people were in a panic. He had like this mass hysteria because people thought UFOs had actually landed in New Jersey. And he just really took the format of radio in the days before television. So radio was still the prevalent household thing that people would tune into every night after work, And he just did so many innovative things with it. And it was crazy to me that like it was the same format then as it is now. It's a mic like we're sitting in front of now and a room full of people, and that's it. And just whatever sound effects you have and whatever voices you have, and that's it. And I thought, okay, well, this is sort of, for me as somebody who wanted to be a screenwriter and a comedy writer, this was like the purest form of writing because it all hangs on the written word.
That's right.
And from there, it just sort of translated into everything else. And I found that was like an easy path to get into stand-up. A lot of comedy writers for television and stuff like that, they'll do stand-up because it kind of doesn't make sense to be a comedy writer without at least trying it. So that's what got me into it. But I found I was so written already that definitely was the kind of stand-up I was when I started.
Right.
Out of that,
Just, what do you mean, like stuck to your act, sort of like wouldn't derive, if anything?
Not at all.
Right.
For the first, like, oh my God, at least the first 6 months, I remember I was like terrified of crowd work. So much. I would have my set. If I was going to do 7 minutes, it was like committed to memory. Like, here's the exact amount I'm going to do. And I used to go to shows and just pray, like, I hope I don't get a heckler or like drunk table. Yeah, and I would just motor through my material. And, like any other stand-up, like some nights it works, some nights it doesn't.
I think everyone, though, when you're new, you're so scared of the audience. And scared. You think you have no time. And it's the notion of going off the script, off script, is just so terrifying. And you just plow through. Someone can be like, you suck. You're like, yeah, shopping malls are fun.
Yeah, I had because to me, by that point, I was so used to not looking at my audience, right? I was always talking to a live audience, but the difference is it's me sitting in front of a radio mic. So I can't see them, so it didn't matter to me. Or I'm in a voice booth voicing something,
Right.
Now all of a sudden I'm in front of a live crowd, and I had done it a few times, like I did some sketches at the NAC in Ottawa and stuff like that. But now all of a sudden I'm in this bar for a stand-up show, and stand-up, what I didn't realize at the time, is of course such an organic, in-the-moment thing. you might come out with a set list in your head and go, okay, I'm doing 20 minutes or I'm headlining this show. I'm going to do bam, bam, bam joke, go into this thing, tag it with this new tag, blah, blah, blah. I was so terrified of having to interact with the audience at all. I couldn't, because you have to be fluid with it, right? You have to be in the moment and work with whatever's going on. Sometimes on the feeling of a show, as you know, like you might go to a show with all these things in your mind and completely throw it out the window just because you might want to spend 7 minutes riffing off of something somebody in the crowd said or jumping on a theme that the comic that just came off stage was going with. I had no idea how to do that at the time because of radio. I was like, here's my script. It's in my mind and that's what I'm committed to. So it sort of took a long time to find harmony between those two worlds, you know, to figure out like, okay, radio obviously has to be a strength for doing stand-up. It's just another form of comedy that I've been doing all these years. But I had to sort of like learn how to transition from one to another, which is funny because that's, you know, going from film and TV to radio to begin with, I sort of had to adapt at that time anyways. So, you know.
It would have been great if you hadn't adjusted and just showed up on stage with like fart sound effects and like bumpers.
There was actually a clip of the first stand-up set that I ever did filmed here in Toronto at this place called The Starving Artist. They're actually, like, it's still a restaurant that's open. There's a couple of them.
Right.
They're one of the network sponsors. But I went back and looked at it, and I actually at one point did have a tape recorder with me and started playing these sound effects for one of the jokes that I had. Yeah, so I actually literally did that.
Hilarious.
Because I had no idea.
And when did you make the transition from radio to stand-up, or at least start to?
When I first moved to Toronto, so I came here summer of 2011. And again, it was just geographically, I thought, well, okay, I had been humming and hawing over it for years. I had wanted to do stand-up for years. And I didn't get into the scene in Ottawa. I didn't get into the scene in Hamilton. There was no scene in Thunder Bay, really. There was like a couple of sort of like satellite club shows, if you will. And I had just never sunk my teeth into it. I had never, anytime I went down to the US or anything, I had never tried any mics out or anything. So when I got to Toronto, I just thought, well, this is it, because there's a million open mics in this town. If I'm going to do it, then I'll do it here, you know?
Right.
I'll do it once. Maybe I'm going to hate it or I'm just going to eat it so bad and I'll never want to do it again. But if I fell in love with it, this is the place to do that.
And immediately?
Oh, yeah, right away. It was just, you know, tap the vein. I mean, that was it. I was hooked right away. Because it was a beautiful thing, you know, coming out of, at that point, I think 6 years of radio, I guess. At that point, I had been coming out of writing for so many other people for so long, you know, and writing and film, TV and radio and stuff. Just the catharsis of finally writing for myself was just an amazing thing to me. It was just like, holy shit, I can try this thing out right in front of a crowd. If it doesn't work, I know right away. I have no one to answer to but myself, for good or ill. You know, if it tanks, then I have to figure out why and I have to deal with that and correct it. But it was just such a rewarding thing of just like, okay, here's a live audience right in front of me.
Right.
And I'm workshopping this right here and now. And if it doesn't work, I'll literally just go sit down at the bar afterwards and scratch it out and rewrite it and try it again the next night or at some other show tonight, you know?
And did you say there was the Starving Artist was your first?
Starving Artist, yeah.
That was a good room.
That was a lot of fun.
That's what Kitsch turned into, right?
Yeah, that was it's the same venue owners. So
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so the show I do now on Thursdays at Kitsch, one of my many shows, plug some of them. It started off at the Starving Artist. And yeah, that was a great spot.
Why did they move it? It was such a fun, intimate...
Just a bigger venue and later hours. They wanted to make it a nighttime show.
Right.
Yeah, Starving Artist was great, especially
so
when I first came to town, because that summer, I remember, everybody hung out there. So I met so many comics in this town right away, right off the bat, because, yeah, on Thursday nights, everybody just sort of flocked there. And it was hot as hell in there, I remember. And they had this big industrial fan, because they had the little kitchen there. And so where the stage was, you were standing right in front of this massive industrial fan that's just like blowing all your clothes and making tons of noise. It's like a jet engine. No one seemed to really give a shit, though. Comics loved that show. And you'd have to go stand outside and look into the bar through the front window.
Right.
Stand out there smoking and having a beer with everybody.
Yeah.
And just like watch for the cue to come and run up, do your set, and then get back outside, because it was like a sweat box in there. But it was great because it was one of those shows where comics just would hang out with each other.
Yeah, that was a good time. And you met your fiance there.
I did at Kitsch at the new.
Oh, it was
when
at
it moved.
Kitsch. I thought it was at Starving Artist.
No, I met her at Kitsch, but yeah, I met her at the Thursday show I do now.
And did you
Wasn't
take
my
it
show
over?
at the time.
Natasha moved it, who used to host it,
Yeah.
to Kitsch, and then you took it over once it was moved?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, so I used to guest host it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of like the John Goodman to her SNL, I guess. I was like the de facto guest host.
Right.
That's a slot I seem to get. A lot of people just make me their de facto guest host. But yeah, so I was hosting it one night, and
Whatever happened to her?
and she walked. and-
Did she ever do stand-up, pursue stand-up?
Natasha,
produce it?
the
Yeah.
producer, yeah, she would. Not much. She would kind of like every once in a while, just like, here's some stuff I want to burn through.
Right.
She always loved being a producer. That was
Yeah,
her
because
thing.
every time I saw her, she would either get someone to guest host
Yeah.
or just do a shotgun show where everyone just
Yeah.
brings up the next person.
Yeah, that's right. She would once in a blue moon. She would. I think it was more often at first, but yeah, she would guest host. I shouldn't say guest host because it was her own show, but she would host every once in a while.
Right.
But usually she just got comics that she liked to sort of rotate and host, and I started doing that regularly after a while. But yeah, her thing was producing. So she had Starving Artist, she had Kitsch at the time. We did a bunch of shows together at Comedy Bar. One off, we had like a label where we did a bunch of shows. We were like the Mike Nichols and Elaine May. Look at that. That's timely. Mike Nichols just passed away.
Right.
We were the shitty Toronto
R.I.P.
Mike Nichols and Elaine May.
And
There
that's
you go.
funny.
That's his
Yeah,
legacy.
I'm always so fascinated by people that come in the business, and she had a relatively, significant. I mean, that was a great room. And then
Oh, it was,
just-
yeah.
I haven't seen her since.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, you know what it's like. You're out doing comedy every night, and especially in those periods where you're like really grinding it out.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think if not a lot's happening at the same time, it can probably get stagnant. It can
Yeah.
feel stagnant, and like you're maybe spinning your wheels. And I think there's a certain eject point for some people where it's like, well, where do I see this 5 years down the road from now?
Right.
Do I want to be an open mic comic forever? Or am I realistic about it? Do I think this is going somewhere? Or is it just like a fun hobby that I'm maybe getting burnt out on? Because it takes up a lot of your life. Especially,
to, yeah.
It has to, especially now, like, you and I are both working comics and we have our other gigs. Like I'm doing radio and all that other stuff. But as a comic, to make it anywhere, especially in Canada, because we're all going after such a small select, really, at the end of the day, like such a small handful of paid gigs, really, even in this city, which is like our main hub. But at the end of the day, you have to do like 5 times the amount of anybody else just to make the nut. So when you aren't on stage, which is all the time, then you're writing, or you're doing a podcast, or you're going out to auditions for commercials and TV shows and stuff, or you're putting together a taping, or you're putting together an album, or you're trying to get writing gigs for TV shows, you're contributing to some blogs and some magazines. Like you constantly have to be your own PR machine. Even once you get to the point of like having people to sort of do that for you, like
Yeah.
you got your agent out there and maybe you have some PR people that you're working with on a big show or whatever. You always have to be out there just to stay above water. Even the guys who have sort of made it to the top in Canadian comedy, which again, even that sentence alone is such a precarious thing. It's the workflow never stops.
You always have to work. And
Always.
You take a day off and you feel it. You feel
Absolutely.
You feel guilty. You feel.
Oh my God.
I can't believe, like, thinking back even just a year ago, where I was a huge pothead, and I can't believe how. Now I've basically given up all my addictions for work. I'm like a workaholic now. I cannot.
That's
stop.
your drug. That is.
Long days, long nights. I just work all the time at something, and I can't even imagine before how I could just sit there and just watch other people just do it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, and it's funny because when I first started really getting into stand-up, like, started making money off of it and getting on some good shows that I had been coveting and things like that, took my family and friends a long time to sort of get it, that like how much you have to do it. Because I think to them at the time, they were just like, you're just hooked. This is
You're obsessed,
your
yeah.
addiction, which is true too, for sure. But you have to be constantly doing that. I always say it's kind of like those people who go to the gym obsessively every day, you know, and they feel like if they skip one day at the gym, all of a sudden they just gain 30 pounds
Right.
in water weight, that's sort of the way it happens in stand-up. You're just like, you take a week off or something. If you're not working on something else, if you're just taking some downtime just because of it, you know, and you're not working on something, right away you feel like it's all gone, like you forgot how to ride the bike. Because there's also 300 people right in line right behind you going after the same stuff, you know?
Tell me a little bit about starting in Toronto. Like, how did you push through and get past that eject point where what you talked about before? Because starting in Toronto, first of all, there's a million open mics.
Yeah.
A lot of them aren't inspiring.
Yeah,
to say
that's a nice way to put it. Yeah,
to put it nicely.
Yeah,
in the way that, like, I just avoid a lot of them. I do a handful of open mics.
Yeah,
and I stick to those because the way I see it, I mean, there's different schools of thought on this. Some people say I just want to say it into a microphone, say my material, and that's beneficial. Sure, I can subscribe to that, but for me, it's not, because if I'm like enthusiastic about a new premise or potential bit, I bring all this enthusiasm to a stage.
Yeah.
And if that stage happens to be in the back of some restaurant where there's 11 comics, no audience members, and I say my material into the microphone that so many people claim are beneficial and it gets nothing, I then feel shitty about it. Like, and to take that around from shitty open mic to shitty open mic, like, how do you get like past that? I find the only thing it's good for doing these kinds of rooms is getting good at doing these kinds of rooms.
Exactly.
Because you'll see comics up on there. There's 11 comics in the audience. They're not laughing at anything. It's quiet, but they're owning it. They just seem like they're killing in front of 300 people. They're fully confident. But that's really the only benefit. Like, so when all you have at your disposition are those types of rooms, how do you keep going? Because you can't, I mean, you can't just go to Yuck Yucks and do a set or Absolute or you have to do those rooms when you start in a city like Toronto. Like I had 7 years experience when I came here, so I didn't necessarily need to go to
Yeah, you weren't starting fresh.
Right.
That's the interesting thing too, is like everybody has their, I always call it their comedy hometown.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever they started. And I felt like I was lucky to start stand-up in Toronto because there's so many rooms you can do. But yeah, when you're in a room like that where it's just like a handful of comics talking to each other and there's no crowd, I think at a certain point you're just doing that just to commit something to memory.
Right. Okay.
That's really the only good thing about a lot of those. And again, for sure they're necessary, like you said. Like it's weight training for a while, you know. But then you figure out who you are and you figure out what rooms you gravitate towards and what rooms you like and what comics you sort of run with and what your niche is. And especially in Toronto, you start to, like, outside of just the clubs, you start to make your way onto the more sort of coveted indie shows that are going on. Maybe a Friday night show that pays you $20 or something, you know, or just a show that looks good to get onto because they only book certain comics. And eventually, I think everybody who is going to stay with it in the long run, because they'll either figure it out or life will figure it out for them.
Yeah.
But the ones who stay with it, that's sort of the way everybody makes it, if you will. Like, making it's a tricky term, but it's when you get to that point where you can actually comfortably peel away the open mics, where you don't need to be out there doing them 7 nights a week and running around in the winter and hitting 4 mics a night, you know, where you can start being selective about what you do. So it's like, okay, what's my week coming up look like? I have 4 shows or I have 7 shows, but 3 of these are paid shows and 2 of these are just cool, fun indie shows. And one of these is a show that I like to do because the host is a friend of mine and blah, blah. You sort of melt back those layers. And again, everybody does it in their own different way. Maybe somebody picked up a writing gig through doing stand-up. So that becomes their main focus and they're doing stand-up and that writing gig. Or they started a podcast like you, or they got picked up by one of the clubs, or, you know, whatever happens, you just sort of find your way to, like, break free of those training wheels of the open mics every night. Some people love it. Some people do it forever.
Right.
There's a lot of open mics now that I haven't been to in a long time that I started off doing. And there's some that I still go to just because they're fun, or just a lot of the times now the motivation is just, there's a couple comics I haven't seen in a few weeks. I know if I go down to this room, I'm going to run into a bunch of people. So it's like a little hangout for a couple hours and then throw in a set and go home.
Right. And, okay, so where are you at with it now? Like, what's specifically stand-up? Like, we'll get into the podcasting and all that, but with stand-up, because I understand you've taken it dialed it notch. Holy shit! Dialed it down a little bit.
You're having a stroke.
This is a recurring theme on the podcast. I struggle to get things out for some fucking reason. It's maybe because I don't know. I'm French, maybe. I don't know. So, what was I saying?
I like to do it live on air, so don't worry.
Right. At least I can edit it out, but I don't edit anything out. I'll edit
Raw
things
and
in.
real.
Actually, I'll edit more mistakes in.
That's right.
To keep the theme. Yeah. Where are you with stand up now? Where do you see it going? Is it your main thing? Do you want? Yeah. What's the goal?
I see it now as sort of like a tributary. Oh, see, it's contagious. A tributary to all the other things I'm doing now. Like where I'm at now is sort of what I call my way of making it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not signed with any club, and that's, I don't know, that's just not for me. I never got into it wanting to like be, necessarily a road comic. I always knew I was geared more towards being a host.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always run a few of my own shows pretty early on when I came to Toronto. I got into doing that early. Now I see it for me as a way to just bring all of my worlds together. So like everything I write for the magazines and for shows and stuff like that, those to me tie in with TV shows that I'm on and now the podcast network, which is the big project. And I see it as sort of a way of taking all of these worlds that I was always sticking my feet in. It's like film and TV and radio and then stand-up and acting and blah, blah. I see it as right now I'm at a point in my life and in my career where all those worlds are coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm figuring out what fat I can trim in each one of those, pursuits or whatever. That feels like an asshole word to use, but each one of those disciplines. But I'm sort of each one of those arenas. But yeah, I'm sort of at a point now where I'm just like, here's the way I can bring all of these things together. I keep on doing a hand movement on the table, which no one is going to see because
he's funneling
I'm
things.
funneling. I'm doing it like a river. It's like a tributaries leading into one big river. Yeah, where I'm bringing everything together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sort of seeing how stand-up can tie into all the other things I'm doing. Instead of them just all being a bunch of different things that I'm doing, I'm trying to like sort of build it all together into one career. The interesting for me at this point about stand-up, after being in radio for a decade, and writing for so many other people and being on the air and stuff, the interesting thing for me now is I'm on the radio so much more now because of stand-up than I ever was as someone who's actually in radio. It's so fucking weird. Like, I'll go back to stations that I used to write for now, but I'm there as a guest to plug things. And it's so strange. It's kind of a cool, like, it's a fun full circle. Wow, it's kind of cool. I really am in my 30s, eh? It's so neat. It's so neat now. But it's interesting to, like, go back to these places where I cut my teeth as a writer, and now I'm a guest plugging stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now I've been hitting a lot of shows plugging the podcast network because that's the big thing. So yeah, to me, stand-up is now a part of the overall puzzle that fits. And I'm comfortable enough now in it to sort of say, here's the stand-up I want to do, here's what I want to keep, and here's the stuff that I don't feel like I need to go out every night and do anymore, because now it's just an overall part of this sort of end game.
Mm-hmm.
That's everything funneling together. So yeah, it's interesting. It's like I said, everybody has their different way of like getting out of the open mic circuit, and not necessarily getting out of it, because it's still stand up. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm going and selling out stadiums or anything like that. I'm not on the road all the time. I'm sometimes on the road, but yeah, it's just a way of sort of finding my own footing in it now, and just going, okay, I don't need to do as much of this stuff.
Right.
I'm sort of established enough to the point where I can be comfortable in it and figure out how it fits in with everything else. You know, and it's interesting because I had to go at it and grind it out at the open mic 7 nights a week, multiple shows a night for a few years before I sort of figured that out. And now it's a way of like, okay, I can get on this TV show now. I have this on my resume now. This is all nice. This is all funneling into what I'm actually creating myself.
Right.
You know, but it's sort of, yeah, everybody finds their own way. Some comics hit the open mics for years and then they get picked up by one of the clubs and it works out beautifully for them, and that's great. And that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to be a road comic, and they're just fucking cut from that cloth and tailor-made for it. And they will be a rock star in that world, you know. for me, it's sort of just become a way of taking all of the things I always did and making them my life's work, you know.
Got it.
Which is weird. It's maybe that's part of being in my 30s now. I don't know. Maybe I just get tired easier too. But yeah, for me, it's just all sort of supporting the same end game. And right now, for sure, the podcast network is the big thing.
Let's talk about that. Let's get into it a little bit. Talk hole.
I know. A lot of people always go taco, and they say no, talk hole. Elijah Schlesinger was here for JFL 42, as 42 other people were. Or no, 42 people. Otherwise, it'd be JFL 43. She was one of the 42. But anyways, I had to call her up for the magazines, and I was like, I'm doing this podcast network. This is, we're doing like a Canadian. This is our answer to Earwolf and Feral and whatever. So I asked her to give me some IDs for it, and she did, but most of them she just ragged on the name, which was my favorite thing anybody said about it. She was just like, that is the shittiest, most awkward name for a podcast network. Talkhole? That's gross. And I was like, that's great. I'm going to use that. Thank you. I love that.
Is that what you call it? IDs when they're like, this is Elijah Schlesinger? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't
See,
know
that's a little radio jargon for you.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought it was a bumper or a bump.
Bumper's kind of an old school thing. We always call it IDs now. Like when you're listening to a radio station, let's say like, I'll use a real one, I guess, because I can't really think to make up a fake one, but like Q107. So you're listening to Q107 and it's like, blah, 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 this Q107.
Hey, this is Rain Maida, and you're listening to Toronto's classic hits rocks 107 Q107. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's an ID.
Yeah, that's an ID right there. Yeah. So I've been sort of treating the podcast network as a radio station in that way. Like anytime someone's in the studio, get some of those IDs.
Yeah.
Get some Canadian comic that no one's ever heard of going, hey, this is so-and-so. You're listening to Talkhole. But yeah, that's my baby for sure.
And how did that come about? Because there was a Canadian podcasting network.
Yeah.
Pod Almighty.
Yeah.
Now defunct.
Yeah, and there are some that like, exist online or run shows or whatever. But the idea was to have our own real full-fledged Canadian podcast network where we have a home studio that people come into and we pick up sponsors and just sort of highlight all of these podcasts here in Toronto and beyond that some great comics are doing. And even beyond that, there's we have some shows on there that aren't even necessarily comedy podcasts. They're just good, solid podcasts that we thought were different and interesting. And but yeah, how did that come about? Really, for me, it was it was my way of sort of going, okay, how do I finally bring together radio and comedy? Like I've kept these worlds so separate, so apart.
Right.
And
because you love podcasting.
Absolutely.
From what we've talked, obviously.
Yeah.
In our lives.
Yeah.
In the past. And you are a huge podcaster. You have your own podcast and listen to them. And it just seems like the natural thing and coming from radio and all that. Before you mentioned that you saw radio change in that with social media.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Is that like in what way? Do you mean? Yeah, in what way, basically?
I think it made like as far as traditional like terrestrial radio, if you will, just regular tune-in radio. I think it just found it was a new way for them to connect with an audience, which was necessary. I know that sounds like a simple thing, but it was so necessary because 10 years ago, when I was first starting out, that's when satellite was like a brand new thing, right? And satellite was just this giant monster that was coming to destroy terrestrial radio forever, and it was going to be buried forever. Kind of like people said about shooting movies digitally versus film back then, like when I was in film school, it was like digital's here and people are going to destroy film projectors everywhere. No one's going to shoot on 16 or 35 mil anymore. It's dead. It's gone. Which, of course, turned out not to be true. It's the same as like vinyl albums versus MP3s, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, it was just social media was a way for radio to sort of adapt and just engage with its audience and keep the loyal audience.
Got it,
and, in the face of this new thing coming in. And again, satellite radio isn't going anywhere. That's still here 10 years later.
Yeah.
It didn't destroy radio. It's basically two different ways to get the same thing.
And yeah, and that kind of all sort of bleeds into podcasting, which is all of those things. It's like radio with social media minus any rules.
Which is that's what I fell in love with podcasting. To me, again, because if I'm going back to when I first did radio, so long before stand-up, when I first started radio and I was all about the origins of radio and all about the simplicity of it and all about the sort of history of it, the golden age of radio and everything. Podcasting, to me, the thing that stuck out right away was that it is exactly what radio originally started as.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this pure thing where it's people with sort of no filter in some sense, no filter. They aren't being, not to sound like fuck the man, but they aren't being, governed by some boardroom. It's broadcast from a studio, not from a boardroom. I always tell people, but it's just a pure form of radio again,
Mm-hmm.
the way it started, because every podcast is completely different. When you start a podcast now, you have to think okay, what's my format? How can I make this different?
Right.
How can I play with this medium? I don't need any money. I don't need any budget. I don't need any props, whatever. I just need the mic and the people and the writing. And how can I do something that completely plays with this medium? So podcasting is just as old as radio itself, the idea anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's just the Wild West all over again. Because we don't have all these constraints on us anymore.
Right.
And so when I got into podcasting, I just thought shit, yeah, this is it. This is taking the things that I love, like comedy and radio, and just bringing them together and doing it my own way. And, even when I started my podcast a couple of years ago, I think I had 4 comedy shows that I was running, and that was my main focus and everything else that comes with that, doing TV shit and writing gigs and stuff like that. But I always would tell people at the time, out of all of my things, out of all of my properties, if I was to give up everything tomorrow and I only got to pick one thing, easiest question in the world, it would have been the podcast. Because to me, that was the way I was bringing everything together. And that was everything I loved about radio to begin with. That was just never there. All of a sudden, it was here in front of us.
Right.
Not to make, podcasting sound like this big holy thing, but in a way it kind of is, because it's going back to the roots of radio.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just liberating again,
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, the people that will listen, that want to listen, will listen, and the people that don't just don't have to.
Yeah.
I mean, you're putting yourself out there in a way that you can really carve out a niche for yourself and a fan base, and it's a great medium. So how did you decide on the structure of your network, that you're gonna get a home studio and do all these things? How do you come up with that?
When I was at Pod Almighty, I loved the idea of doing a podcast that felt like I was going in a radio station to plug something. I love the idea of having a home studio. Not only because, it's great to be able to bring guests into a studio. It just has that level of sort of, this is a legit thing. This is where we're at. This is a form of broadcasting. But it also, again, it just made me sort of think back to those days of think about all these old school radio actors in a studio together, just grinding stuff out and just creating these new exciting things that nobody had ever done before. And I loved the idea of being in a studio with a podcast, because podcasting is it's a do-it-yourself medium.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it started. It started in people's garages and around their kitchen tables and in green rooms at comedy clubs and stuff like that. And people with everything from a cell phone to a MacBook to a Zoom recorder, whatever they were using, I loved the idea of taking that new medium and just legitimizing it and going, let's treat this like radio. Let's have a home studio. Let's get sponsors.
Mm-hmm.
But we're podcasting. We're saying what we want. We're doing the shows we want. We're creating things that haven't been done before in that environment. And we didn't have that in Canada. Pod Almighty had that set up. And when Pod Almighty came to an end, I thought, well, I had this whole sort of template worked out for it. I thought, here's where I want to take it next. Here's what I think we should do. Here's what I think it should look like. And I sort of looked at how these new podcast networks springing up in the States were doing things. So Feral and Nerdist and Earwolf and stuff like that. And I thought, why don't, probably the same reason why Comedy Network happened in Canada, right?
Right.
Say what you will about it now. That's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other episode. But just the idea of they have one, why can't we?
Mm-hmm.
Canada, and of course for us right here in Toronto, we have such a huge base of just insanely talented comics and podcasters, all these people starting their own shows up, good shows that really should be exposed to people. And I thought, strength in numbers. Why don't we have a home studio? Why don't we bring them together under one umbrella? Why don't we try and get people listening to these as much as possible and try and get some sponsors tied in so we can do live shows and just build our own thing. Because doing anything in showbiz in Canada, not just comedy, but everything that ties in with that, you definitely have to build your own things. I think it's a double-edged sword in Canada. It's both an opportunity and a flaw, of course, because we aren't America and we live next door to America. So we're right beside this just showbiz behemoth, the showbiz capital of the world. And so, of course, we're overshadowed by their content. That makes sense. That makes total sense. And so it's hard for us to get recognition for the people in this country. And it's hard for anybody to make it in this country because, again, there's just not that big of a pool of money. It's hard to get our own Canadian audience to watch and listen to things. But on one side, it's also just a huge benefit too in some ways because it's almost like a frontier. Yeah. There's so many things that we haven't done yet here or that nobody else is doing.
Totally. I agree with that. And I mean, it's funny you say that you have to create your own opportunity, and you do in Canada. And in the States, they have more. It's like it's reverse mentality. Like in the States, you could very well be a comic and just wait for opportunity to land on your lap.
Yeah. Because
there is enough of that to go around. But it's really not like that. When you go around in the States, a lot of comics, most of them in the States, have this crazy work ethic. They sort of understand the template. They get, I've talked about this with Darren Frost.
Great example, for sure, of a lot of this stuff.
And he, in Canada, you'd get made fun of if you have a business card. You know what I mean? In the States, everyone has a business card. Everyone has merch. People that shouldn't, by the way. Terrible comics are working as a result. I've seen some really bad acts that are but they're making a living off comedy. Yeah. They understand the template. They treat it as a business. And in Canada, where we don't have that opportunity, so many comics will just sit there, wait for opportunity to land on their fall in their laps. And again, they'll be the first one to make fun of you if you have a business card or sell merch. But it's like, you have to carve out and treat it like a business. People feel like you're taking away from the art side if you're good at the business side. And,
exactly.
And you can't marry these two. And you can, absolutely. And you have to.
And you have to, in Canada especially. And Darren Frost is such a good example of that. I remember he did an episode of my podcast one time, and I came out of it and I think I was, it was probably maybe the 10th episode or something. It was a long time ago. And I came out of it just going holy shit, this was simultaneously the most eye-openingly depressing episode, but at the same time so fucking invigorating for a young comic like me and somebody who was trying to build all of my own things. Because here's this guy who at the time he had just put out his 4th DVD, and he has gotten to, the rise through the ranks and stand up in Canada for good or ill, whatever that means. And it was just sort of so affirming to see a comic of that level just go, yeah, look, I get to do all these clubs and people kind of know who I am across Canada because, yes, it's Canada, but I mean, my voice is heard on all these animated shows and I'm constantly doing my own tours across the country, put out 4 DVDs. I'm on Sirius all the time, blah, 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 blah. Great resume, right? But at the same time, he was like, even after doing this for almost 30 years and at the level I'm at, I still have to work at it just as hard as I did when I was starting out. So I always have to have 5, 6, 7 projects on the go at all times if I want to keep what I've accumulated so far.
Right.
It's not like the States where you can strike it rich and get that one good gig, and hopefully that makes it for you. Just because we don't have that showbiz infrastructure here.
Yeah.
So even when you make it, and again, I'm putting air quotes around that because what does that mean in Canada? Basically, it means you get to pay your bills, literally pay your bills off of doing what you love, and then you just work to sustain that. I think that's the big difference. The American dream in comedy, like anything else in comedy and showbiz in the States, is you could strike it rich.
Right.
I think the flip side of that, the Canadian dream is you don't have to do a 9-to-5 job. If you work really hard at it, you can get the satisfaction of doing what you were meant to do and what you're good at and what you love and what fuels you creatively and just gives you all the outlets you need. You can get to do that for a living here, but you have to sort of build those opportunities yourself,
I mean, I'm of the mind that you can definitely have a good career in Canada,
You for sure can, and it's always nice to see people who stay here and make it work. Because again, there are few and far between TV properties here and movies and stuff like that. But I just love it when you see people who are insanely talented in this country, and you know that if they went to the States, they probably would have a good shot of making it down there. But they also just want to be in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
They want to live in Toronto, or they want to live in Vancouver and do what they love. And it's nice for us, too, as a showbiz and as a country, when those people stay here and actually build things. I like seeing people in Canada who are on TV who should be on TV.
Right.
You know, like I just did a show with Norm Soucy the other day, and he's got this new show on Super Channel, Too Much Information. And we were talking about that. It's nice to see all these panels of comics going on his show and him even hosting the show and having fun with it, and it's going to be a good show. And how long will it last? Who knows? Hopefully a long time, not, knock on Formica. But it's just nice to see people doing that in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Every time someone who's truly talented stays here and helps nourish the scene a little bit and creates content for Canada that Canadians hopefully will catch on to and dig, fuck, then we're laughing, you know?
Yeah.
We just need more and more of that. So that's the struggle, I think, all the time. So people like you and people like me and a million others who are trying to like build our own content and build our own things, the opportunity is there for us to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We might not get rich at the end of the day. In fact, we probably won't. But we'll be able to make some shit that we're pretty proud of, and hopefully that Canadians catch on to and go like, oh, we need more of this. This is cool. Okay, we can do this in our own backyard. And again, people have been saying this for a million years, but that's only because it's true.
Right.
You know?
So back to the network.
Yep.
How many people, how many shows do you have right now? Because you're what, 3-4 weeks in since launch?
Yeah, we this weekend, again, when this airs, it'll be like a couple weekends ago. This weekend we're heading into our studio.
Actually, I'm gonna put this out today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was gonna
nice.
say off the top because I'm late for my Friday release. I usually do it
Oh,
at midnight,
beautiful.
like 18 hours ago or whatever.
Look at that. I'm hitting the circuit today. I'm
There you go.
plugging.
16 and a half
I
hours
came
ago.
from Sirius to here.
So you're still 30, by the way.
I'm still 30.
And
We have just fucked with the time continuum here big time all day.
yeah. Because so this is gonna be today's episode.
Oh,
It's
beautiful.
late. Sorry, listeners, for
No.
being late.
You know what? Love it, you guys. Love what he's doing. Yeah, this weekend we're in the studio for our 4th full day of like a bunch of shows coming in and recording and guests passing
that's 4
through and
weeks.
stuff like that. 4 weeks in the studio. We have 9 existing shows that we picked up, and we have 3 new network shows that we're working on right now, and there's some new ones I want to pick up in the new year. So starting off with about a healthy dozen.
Cool.
So that it's a good sort of roster of shows that I really liked that I want people to check out. And a lot of them are heritage shows that have been around a while. Some of them were Pod Almighty shows that were on there with me. Some of them are just cool podcasts that comics were doing that I thought, oh man, I want to work with them.
Do you think you can have too many? Do you think you can dilute the brand by having just, if you sign, like I know you're not signing everyone
Yeah,
and
yeah.
anyone, but I just mean like already.
Because then
like,
I'll be in the poorhouse. I think as long as they don't overlap.
mm-hmm.
You know, so like if I have I'll use like Amanda Day as an example. She's doing a new like online dating show on there where she's just talking about the crazy shit she runs into on social media and on like Tinder and stuff like that as a single person out there on the internet. I think it would be too many if we have 2 shows that are similar.
Right.
You know, but I like the diverse mix that we have so far. Like so far at launch, we have my show, which is, like an inside comedy show. Fair enough. We're just sitting there drinking coffee and it goes off the rails. It's, but we have lifestyle shows. We have a comedy cooking show. We have a show that's hosted by 3 longtime radio and animation voice actors who talk about the voice acting business, and they bring in guests who are like on kids' cartoons and stuff like that.
Cool.
And everybody makes it a little bit funny. We have a show that's hosted by a panel of 4 people, and every episode, every week, they tackle like a different topic, and they bring in an expert to sort of like defute what they might think about it or like teach them something. We have shows about parenting, about sex, prank calls, a lot of inside comedy shows, a lot of stand-up shows. We have a lot of shows where comics are coming on and plugging stuff, shows that are kind of like a late night format of podcast. So yeah, the main thing for me is just like, oh yeah, we have improv shows, which are a lot of fun. So it's like comics showing up and just completely in character, and it's just on the fly, whatever happens kind of a thing. Yeah, to me, it's just important to highlight what I thought were just some great podcasts and just have a diverse mix. It's sort of like I'm thinking of it in terms of what would happen if I got to program my own radio station.
Right.
Or what would happen if I got to put together my own channel on Sirius. So the stuff I've sort of always dabbled in anyways, and the stuff I've always wanted to do, it's sort of like I'll apply that radio logic to podcasting and build a network. That's all it is.
I'll ask you the same question I did stand-up, your stand-up. Where do you see this going? This is obviously your baby. This is all your marbles put into the same satchel.
Is that a thing?
It is now.
This is all of your pogs in the same Play-Doh tin.
These are all your peas into the same pod.
Yeah.
Pow. Punny.
Oh, shit.
So, where do you see this going? Do you think this is it? This is sort of your... You said it's your baby, but career-wise, this will be the anchor. This will be what propels Dean Young Enterprise forward.
Absolutely. Like, this is where I see things going. I mean, yeah, I'm always going to be on the air. That's the dream gig for me. I see this. Yeah, can people make money off of it? Sure. That's going to take a long time to build, of course. For now, the biggest satisfaction of it for me personally, and my own sort of selfish reasons for doing it is, again, just for me to bring together radio and comedy. And then the other end of that is just because I thought that's a thing we should have in Canada. So why am I not the guy to do it? I should be the guy to do it. And here we go. And I love it, This is what I love. But yeah, I do see it being hopefully building up and being a brand for Canada. I have a lot of faith that it could be that. That's why I'm sort of dedicating everything to this. Yeah, do I think I'll quit everything else and just have Talk Hole? No, because even if that did magically happen one day, I know myself well enough to know that I would never give up everything else. I'm still going to be doing stand-up. I'm still going to be going out to auditions. I'm still going to be, hopefully hosting shows on satellite or terrestrial radio and all the normal stuff.
Oh, you got very sultry there.
I did get very sultry. I got very smoky. I was like,
I don't think I'm going to quit anything because at the end of the day, I'm always going to have stand-up. I'm always going to have writing.
I'm always going to be doing the things that I'm doing. I actually like that. I should have just done that the whole time. I like that. That's fun to do. But yeah, I think if we really do this thing right and work with the right people and get the right sponsors and get the right support from certainly right here in Toronto, but beyond that too, because this isn't Toronto's podcast network. The point is to have this be a cross Canada thing. I see it taking off to that level where it becomes hopefully a brand for us and leads to more live podcasts and live podcast festivals and gets a listenership across the country going and gets some notoriety, and not just for me or my partner, but also for the podcasters, because these are just talented people, comics who I already liked working with, and some podcasters I've met along the way who I just think should be highlighted, and I just dig working with them.
You said your partner. You have a partner?
Yep. Yeah.
I thought I didn't know
the
if you had
Wozniak to my jobs.
I didn't know if you had a partner or that's how you refer to your soon-to-be wife.
Fiance?
Yeah,
my
partner.
She's getting more plugs today than anybody else because that's the whole Sirius earlier was about her. But yeah, I mean, I started doing this and laying the groundwork, and when I was going to take over Pod Almighty and everything. So there's a friend of mine, I'll give him a shout out, Mike Dohan. I worked with him years ago in radio and TV. He's like a IT guru. And so he said, well, I can build the framework, build the page with you, which is simple, meat and potatoes, right? So we started working on it more and more, and it just sort of became a co-project. So again, that's what I always like to say is there's no jobs without a Wozniak, you know? I'm the guy with the idea and who's hosting the podcasts and all that, and he's the guy who I love working with and also is making it happen with me. So, yeah. And
Cool.
for us, it's just, at the end of the day, it's two people who love podcasts and who thought, fuck, it's silly that Canada doesn't have this.
That's great.
So
It's exciting.
let's do it.
It's
you
good.
know, let's make it happen.
It's the frontier, like you said.
It's the frontier, my friend.
You are going to get married. When are you getting married?
Summer of 2016.
Some shit.
Yeah,
Could you plan it further ahead in the future?
I know. Well, we were going to next.
That screams commitment issues right there.
I know. Well,
Let's get married in 2020.
let's do it 5 years from now. We were going to next fall, but I want a summer wedding, and so does Kim, my fiance. Next summer, my brother's already getting married.
Got it.
So we were like, that's kind of a dick move, and she was like, well, we got the house and stuff.
What's the
We're-
rush?
Yeah,
So you got a house.
We aren't going to not be in love.
And she dabbled in comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
but
she's
now
still doing it.
Still doing it, but she's a lawyer now, right?
Yeah, she's a
professional.
So she does both, which in itself is a whole other kettle of fish. Like that's a hard balance too, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we both have careers. My career just is tied in with more with comedy, but she's good at comedy and loves doing it. So she still goes out there and does it.
And she's a lawyer. You're a
Yes,
comedian, podcaster, radio writer, a producer.
Yeah.
So we can assume she's the breadwinner in the family.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
You just deflated there.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. We don't really ever sweat it. Really, it's just like whatever. It just sort of like, for sure, takes a load off some things for sure. Like she happens to have a gig that makes good money. I bring bread home, but it's like
no, for
she has
sure.
a
I'm not
bigger
taking
loaf.
away what you're doing. It's just
No,
you
yeah,
know.
no, 100%.
Let's be honest. Being a comedian podcaster, you'd be hard pressed to.
We'd be
in
living
this
in an
stage,
apartment forever.
Buying a home
Oh, God,
in Toronto, like a house.
Yeah,
You know?
I know that part's still strange to me. Like we haven't even moved in yet. Now it's just like.
And in a
Right
great
now, it's just a
neighborhood, too.
fun thing that I say on the internet.
Right.
It's like, hey, check out pictures of this house we bought. But then in like a month from now, we're going to be living in it. And it's
Right.
going to be weird and real.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Well, like anything else, I remember when I proposed to her, I was like telling all my friends about that. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to pop the queue. But it's one of those crazy things where it didn't feel real until that day, you know, until I actually did it. But
Pop the Q sounds like you're about to try some
Q.
drug. Like
It does,
I'm
eh?
gonna pop the Q.
like I'm
guys.
going to do lewds or something.
Yeah, don't take anything I'm gonna do
It's a
in the
few
next half
decades
hour.
too late, but yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting balance for her for sure because my career and my day stuff all ties in, right? Like radio and comedy is all part and parcel to everything I'm doing. Whereas for her, it's kind of like this. She gets to do this like Superman Clark Kent thing, right? Like she's a career professional in the daytime, and at nighttime she gets to go out and do stand up, which is I think a fun release for her too. Because just like anybody else who does comedy, she's always thinking about stuff throughout the course of her day of just like, oh, fuck, I got to do something about that or I got to tackle that. And then at nighttime, she can put on the casual wear and go out and do it, you know?
Fun Release is actually the my girlfriend's pet name. She's my Fun Release. Do you want to plug? Ayo. Do you want to plug anything, good sir, before we
my God.
go for the close here? Talkhole. What's the website?
Talkhole.co.
.co.
That's a new thing.
Why no, it's been a new thing for like. I got sucked
That's a
into
new
that
thing
shit.
for me. I had no idea. I saw it laid out, and I was like, "This is a typo."
That's why. Okay, so not to cut you off.
Yeah,
but I will, because that came out like
it is your show.
Right. Thank you for reminding me. I forget sometimes. It came out like 5 years ago, maybe. .co. It's a big thing.
Oh, I like .co.
It's a new.
That makes it less confusing.
It's the new .com. It's
Yeah.
the new. It was huge. They had a huge ad campaign on the internet, and so I bought JulianDion.co. I'm like, fucking right. I'm ahead of the game, and it's fizzled into nothing because
You've
everyone
since
thinks
dropped it.
I've dropped it because it's a typo. Everyone thinks it's a
Way to inspire confidence, man.
Well,
I'm just gonna plug the shit out of it. That's
I'm just
all.
saying you should buy. Yeah, plug the shit out of it. It boils down to the brand thing. Like before, it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
But if .com is still available, get that too. Because Julian D or it was what JulianDion.com I have, but it was I think JD Comedy. That's what it was. JDComedy.com was something else. But I'm like, fuck whoever that is. I don't need it. .co is the new thing, and I got JDComedy.co and .ca. I bought literally every domain.
Everything they would like.
Yeah, any spelling of my name, anything, it all goes to JulianDion.com. But I have JDComedy.ca. I had .co, but everyone would end up going to .com because I would have an email address, j@jdcomedy.co. Everyone would send it. It bounced back. I don't get it. Or your website's fucked up. It's just because jdcomedy.com isn't actually anything, but someone does own it. Anyway, all that to say, not to shit on it.
Go to talkhole.co.
I fucked up, and like I changed my email, everything back then, and then I realized everyone thought it was a typo.
I just have this
totally shit on that.
additional email and Twitter on top of all my other ones. That's all.
And is talkhole.com available?
No,
Oh.
I don't think. No,
That's why.
No.
Okay.
we went CO.
I gotcha.
But the Twitter's the same at talkholepod.
You should buy .ca and .net and all that. It's worth it because then people, if you know.
I would like IS
And you
because
should
I have
also
fond memories of Iceland.
You
And
should
that's their
also.
thing.
Oh yeah, you bought it.
No,
Oh.
I should.
You
just as
should
a
also
symbolic thing.
you should buy I lost my train of thought. Talkhole.
.eu, .org, .net,
I forget. Hole.
.xp.
I forget where I was going with that.
Toggle
I didn't mean
hole.
to shit on it. I just because I got sucked into it.
No,
I'm
it makes
it's
sense.
the new thing, and then
It's
it
the new
hasn't-
bullshit.
It hasn't really done anything. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop.
That's where people can go is talkhole.co. Yeah.
Oh, you should buy taco.com. That's what I was trying to say. Not worth it.
I am going to assume that that's probably taken.
Yeah. How about ta.co?
I'll tell you what. If taco.co, that's out there. That's out there. That's available. If taco.com is actually by the grace of God somehow free, I'll fucking buy it just cuz. I'll tell that to your listeners right now. I'll go home tonight and buy it.
Here, give me a sec. Let's do this.
Yeah. Taco.
I'm sure it's something.
Taco.com. You might get porn actually.
Pink Taco. Welcome to the Pink Taco Emporium. No, it's technical advisor, custom solutions for all occasions. No, it's someone owns it.
Oh, some lame sauce fucking.
Someone, yeah.
Oh boy.
Okay, so talkhole.co.co, Twitter at talkhole,
Yep.
and what
At
was
Talkhole Pod.
at talkholepod, and what was the other one?
You can follow me at Comic Dean Young
Comic Dean Young.
on the Twitter. And but yeah, talkhole.co is going to be the.
All right, brother.
the
Thanks for
website.
doing it.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
This is fun times.
Yeah, man. And yeah, I'll see you soon.
All right.
And watch your head. And there she is, folks. Episode 19 in the books. You know what that means? That means next episode is episode 20. Milestone. Huh? 20 epis deep. That's coming at you on Tuesday, November 25th. And like I promised last episode, I'm going to be diligent and consistent on release dates. The days aren't going to change. It's going to be every Tuesday and Friday, new episodes. But the time's going to change. I'm going to drop them at midnight the night before. So technically Tuesday and Friday, but really it's like the Monday night at midnight or the Thursday night at midnight. So by the time you wake up Tuesday and Friday, you get a fresh epi ready to go, ready to start your day, ready to kick off your weekend. If it's Friday, you know what I'm saying. And be sure to stick around and catch the end. There's bloopers at the end of every episode. So if you haven't, go back and just listen. Skip all the way to the end. Pick an episode, skip all the way to the last 30 seconds, and enjoy a little behind the scenes, little blooper action. All right, thanks to Dean Young, my guest today. That was a good chat. Thanks to my producer, Adam Fox, and my sound engineer, Miles Lacroix. What else? Thanks to you. Oh, God, always you. I appreciate it. Without you, this is nothing. Email me, pod@jdcomedyhour.com. Follow on Instagram and Twitter at JD Comedy Hour, and go to facebook.com/JD Comedy Hour. What else? I think that's it. Mom, I love you. That's that. Friday, November 21st. Enjoy your weekend. You're a good person, and watch your head.
It's just a waste of time. Wandering eyes and itchy feet. I'm just a thin, nervous shadow walking backwards down a street. The land is bitter, but the fallen is.
drop in a clip of your stand-up.
Yeah.
Probably in a no kidding clip.
Okay.
You have those up there, right?
Yep. Oh yeah. Those are on the internets.
And because that's usually a good quality one, good crowd reaction. And then I'll give you a short intro. We go from there.
All right. Beautiful.
Say a little something for me.
Beautiful. Check. This is Dean Young from the Julian Dion Comedy Hour podcast.
All right. Okay.
One man brand.
One man brand.
You, not me.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All my things have different names. It's confusing to people.
Right.
Your things are all one
name.
smart umbrella.
That was the whole plan.
Yeah.
For years I've been thinking.
Oh, yeah.
The thing I was trying to think of was what to name it. Comedy Hour. It's so stupid but trivial. But my sister's in copywriting and advertising. She's like, because
it has that old school charm to it, though, too.
And the thing is, there's no. My sister, who's again advertising, she's like, it doesn't matter what you call it. Like, she's like A and W. No one knows what
by
the
that
name
stands for. Yeah.
The point is just build your brand, and then people will know.
Yeah.
Because every show I do is over an hour, so I don't know
Yeah.
Comedy Hour. I just